So let's go ahead. Hello, and let's go ahead and call this meeting of the Strategic Plan Ad Hoc Committee to order today, July 27th at 1:03 p.m. Let's do roll call. Mike been done? Mike, you're on mute, just so you know. And
Here.
I was like, maybe he just doesn't want to talk to us. James, what?
Present.
Okay, Tom Blue Rock.
Here.
Okay, Carrie Kale is here. Melissa Newt is out today. And so let's move down the agenda, which I don't have in front of me, but I think I can remember. So let's start with notes. We need to approve the note for the 13th and the 20th.
I move approval.
Second.
Great. Motion by Tom, second by Wyatt. All in favor?
All right.
Aye. Okay. Motion passes. Thank you.
Yeah.
There. Look at that. One thing done already. And so we'll go ahead and get started. I just want to check in with everyone briefly before we get going. I hope everyone saw my email. I'm sorry about next Monday. I completely screwed up my schedule. So we won't be able to do the extended meeting on the 1st like we had planned, but we will do it on the Friday as we had planned. And I do have the conference room in the City Hall scheduled for us, so we can meet in person if folks are good with that. And then they have the technology there to Zoom as well. So if anybody wants to join in via Zoom, they can do that as well.
What was the time for that again?
Hold on, I'm checking my schedule.
Friday was 9 to noon.
Not 9 o'clock in the morning. Okay.
I don't have it on my schedule yet.
The radio was on.
So 9 to noon, so we'll schedule that. The other thing that I wanted to ask before we got started is, do we want to hold our usually scheduled meeting next week as well, which would be the Wednesday from 1 to 2? Thoughts?
I'm impartial to it. I think we're probably getting pretty close. I bet we'll be close to wrapped up on the next Friday meeting, but I also know it's good to use the time we've got. So either way.
Same with me. I can do either or both.
Okay. And I will let you know that and then James, I'll come to you, we'll give you this other piece of information. I did get our timeline extended last night by the City Commission. I just asked for 90 days to just have some time. I don't think it's going to take us that long again, but I just we've got what we need to get the job done. So we've been extended. So just for that information as well.
Nice.
James, what are your thoughts?
I'm already scheduled for Wednesday at 1 o'clock, so it doesn't matter to me.
Okay, well then why don't we just plan to do that, and maybe we can, make sure that we're prepped and ready for that extended meeting on Friday. If there's anything we want to make sure
So
we're.
the answer is yes, we're going to do it.
Yeah, so let's do yes. We'll do next Wednesday from 1 to 2, and then we will do the Friday from 9 to 12.
Okay.
Reevaluate at that point. Great. All right. So let's go ahead. I can share my screen. Let me do this first. All right. So this is the updated slide deck from last week. And so we had, I'm going to go to this slide first. So from 2 weeks ago, we had these bullet points: land use and growth, transportation infrastructure, local services, and housing. And then last week we had gone through the list of things that we had pulled individually out of the growth policy, and had land use goals. So make regulations match. The growth policy was our thought there, and thinking about the wording on that to make it look nicer. And then the goal, transportation infrastructure, identify the state requirements, infrastructure needs for growth, population, safe and active transportation. So that's where we had left off last week. Wyatt, if you want to jump in at any point and help guide me along here, I'm happy. I would gladly accept any help.
Well, I just wanted to affirm again, we're looking for land use, transportation, services, and housing, those 4 main topics.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that were these right here.
Yeah, just making sure I'm tracking still correctly.
Mhm.
Okay.
Now, within that, those are categories and we would have sub goals within those, correct?
Or a goal, or one goal per one, or whatever. I mean, I don't know. I don't have any.
I think one of the things that we were talking about that I really liked about this was making those, rather than making them general, having some actual specific things that we would like to see.
I agree.
Focus on, so the land use would, you could make a statement about it. And then within that, make some specific recommendations. And that's usually what kind of generalized goal statements don't do, but I think it would really help put some meat on the bone on this one.
Well, and to your point, so I think for land use, we had settled on make the regulations match the growth policy, and we might have a couple bullets underneath that. And then for transportation, I don't see the notes here, but I remember us talking about connectivity to the north side.
Yeah. Stormwater.
Yep. Parking.
And
I've got the
Yeah.
notes.
Yeah.
Yep, I've got some of the notes here. And so it looks like we had pulled out from our discussion connection to the north side, downtown parking, active trails, make sure infrastructure is updated for future growth, or I think some of the things I had captured last week.
Did we not mention stormwater, or did we not want to include that?
I think we should make that like
I think
infrastructure for growth, i.e. stormwater mitigation, right?
Yeah,
As an example.
yeah, I think here. Yeah, so here I can even do.
Well, if this general, like this statement down at the bottom could be sort of a general statement with a few bullets below it, isn't that what we're kind of after?
I think so. Yeah, Tom, I do. I think we're close to that too.
Right.
So, so I think what we're saying is develop the needed infrastructure for continued growth, right? And the 4 bullet points are connectivity to the north side, parking downtown, active community and trails, and infrastructure requirements, i.e. storm water mitigation. Is that what we're saying?
Yeah.
Yeah. Did you capture that, Wyatt, or do you want me to get it?
Yeah, I'm working on it.
Okay, great,
Give me just 2 seconds here.
for sure. Wyatt, would it be easier if I give you, would you like to share your screen instead of how
Sure.
I'm doing it now? Okay, let me stop my share and then we can let me get you.
You just have to enable me, that's all.
Okay, you should be good to go.
feel like the infrastructure for current growth seems like it's open-ended when really the stormwater mitigation and the groundwater, I guess, infiltration into our systems. Those are things that should be short-term goals. Like we need that done sooner rather than later to avoid or to be able to make this 10,000 resident milestone.
Yeah, I
Like
mean,
we gotta be able to walk into 10,000 residents without facing penalties from the state.
I mean, this is really what we're saying for infrastructure we're concerned about, right? These four things. I mean, we might as well just, to your point, James, like maybe let's just, if that's what we're gonna bring up.
well, and you've said needed infrastructure for continued growth.
Right, which is
the general, I mean, we don't need to get into the weeds on every street improvement project that's gonna happen. And those are kind of ongoing, like, they've got the whole, sort of middle of the west side torn up right now for some new water mains and things. But you're assuming that that's gonna just continue it on its normal path.
I'm saying that, but I'm saying that we need to have some steps taken care of before we meet 10,000 residents,
Right.
which is the stormwater pollution.
And that's why that's specifically called
Yeah.
out.
Yeah.
what
Line item.
we're really calling out is these are the four things that residents are most concerned about.
I agree with that.
Mhm.
That being us, right?
Us is a proper representation of the, well, I mean, it
Small
is,
enough
I mean,
population size.
Yeah.
All right.
okay, so that's land use and connectivity. So then,
Have we finished with land use?
I felt land use was pretty well taken care of with all of the goals and strategies that we have.
Well,
I mean, we can
but
peel
there's a
them
lot of
back.
those. I mean, I thought there were sort of, that just needs to be consolidated a little bit more like it was there. I mean, we were really talking about revising the zoning code to make it consistent with a general plan. I still think the ETJ needs to be a separate bullet because it requires the county to cooperate. It's not, whereas the zoning code is really totally within the purview of the city commission. And it's a separate process for the ETJ.
well, and if you're gonna,
Go ahead.
if you're gonna call things out of the growth plan to the other one would be the subdivision and PUD process too. Need to reflect the plan.
Mhm.
Yeah, so zoning code, I thought somebody brought up, I think it was you, Carrie, that to develop some community gateway overlay zones.
Yeah, I did.
Yep.
Yeah, I had brought that in there too.
And that's a new subject, so maybe that's a separate thing.
Well, my screen is completely dark, but I can hear everybody. I wanted to ask a question about the ETJs and how does the city interact with the county, with the city being the county seat? Is there overlap in ETJ administration for that?
Actually, I don't remember exactly what it was, but a few months ago, Matthew sort of had two paths to doing that. And one involved sort of remaking the city planning commission, and another was sort of doing some kind of a joint county city thing.
Yeah,
And,
there's,
and I don't remember exactly what that was, but it was a real separate process from what it would take to revise the zoning code. And that's why I think I think it needs to be called out separately. No, and I don't know exactly what that is, but there's a bunch of legal requirements and things. And hello.
Hey, Tom, we got questions for the heights of these lights.
Can I do it? I'm tied up until 2.
That's fine.
All right. Okay. Sorry.
yeah, the ETJ gets tricky because it forces a change potentially in our planning board. And again, with Tom, I don't remember all the requirements, but it requires some change in the planning board, potentially bringing on some of the county. In one way, it may force us to lose our planning board completely.
But there was a way, there were some other,
There were some ways around it, but we'd have to look at it.
yeah,
And
it's a complex subject.
it very much is so. And we have to do it the right way because potentially, in my opinion, dealing with the ETJ, and if we have to change things around our planning board, it could sort of stymie us in getting some of this other good work done that we're getting done right now. And so that's the one thing I want to not see happen, because we have a very, in my opinion, high functioning city planning board. The county does not.
Does not.
So
In fact, quite the opposite.
yeah, so I will say I have some reservations around messing around with our planning board because they're doing all this other good work that we need to get done in the city. So I think we have to look at that very strategically and carefully.
But what this is saying is address it.
Yeah.
It's not saying how, it's saying, let's,
And maybe open the door. to
let's figure
conversation.
this out and get it done. And that it's important. How would we be revising? Are we gonna, how would be, okay, well, the subdivisions would be another it would be like the zoning code.
Yeah, and the growth plan calls for the ability to do planned urban developments. So, but there's no process for that other than what's in the growth code. So if we want to implement the growth policy, then we need a process to allow for that to occur.
Or would that be a separate bullet, or would that just be part of the adjusting the zoning code, subdivision and planning process to?
Yeah, I think those could all move up.
Yeah, those could all be in the same.
Yeah.
Because it's all sort of internal city processes sort of having to do with the growth policy.
The only other thing to add to that, which I think is already addressed, it would be the site evaluation process.
Not sure what you mean by that.
Well, so there's a site review, right, for permitting that has to go against these items, right? So the only other component we don't have in sort of regulating what gets built is the site review process.
Well, I think in that recent zoning change, they require that you get before you build anything, you need a zoning permit.
Yeah. Yep. Any new construction requires a zoning permit and then requires a site review.
Check that means that it's consistent with zoning, or
It may be fine. I'm just saying that that's the only.
I think that kind of includes that.
Yeah, the only element I just was calling out because the only element in the process we don't have spelled out here is that portion of the process, which is the permitting and site review process. That's the only piece that's not included in the entire.
Well,
program.
how would you change you would change the code, you would change the rules, but not necessarily the process. I mean,
Potentially, yeah.
every site has to get has to get a permit. Not just a building permit, but a zoning permit. And making the zoning code consistent would imply that.
I will just say, Tom, the site review process isn't terribly stringent.
No.
To say,
Well,
you know,
but it is.
Inspection's not very stringent either, right?
But it is consistent with the codes. I mean, they
Yep.
to make sure that you're consistent with the code, which they just don't They just don't make it a big drama like a lot of other places.
Nope.
The building code is a whole different issue that we probably won't get into.
Yep.
And
And not really our purview because we have to comply with the
I mean,
state's adoption.
it's not planning, it's more public safety and they just adopted, the latest codes. So that's,
Why,
and they do check for that.
so why, if you're talking about site review, not, Jesus, I've lost my words, I'm sorry. But not the process of looking at the building as it's being built, but you're talking about the site review prior to getting the permit to build.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it needs to be included, so we can just move the subject. Like, I just wanted to mention it because it was the only piece of the puzzle that we did not call out specifically, but I don't think it needs to be.
I think there is a site review, it just isn't very.
Do you want the only other thing in the growth plan that kind of got called out a lot was the annexation process is in the growth plan, and we don't have that in here.
I think that's a good one.
Maybe limit annexation
Or
as a goal, like just like to whatever possible limit annexation of additional land, right? Like,
I mean, one thing that really didn't have, it kind of was implied, but didn't happen was, where should the city boundary be? I mean, it's a really, I mean, the growth plan kind of punted on, it sort of took the city as it is, took the ETJ as it is, sort of
here they are.
did a land use plan for both.
Yep.
And maybe one of these things should be, really sort of take a look at where that city boundary should be.
I do want to just call out, and maybe this is a personal opinion, but the land use plan that was called out in there really is about pressures, not exactly here's what we really want to do. Like, it didn't really make a conclusion. It just said, here's the areas by which we see that are going to occur to have additional pressure. And here's what they are currently today.
Well, it has a land use plan in there that says.
Yeah, but if you read all the supporting document around that, it's really like an evaluation of the current state. It's not saying like, here's the rule. There's no rule there.
I'm not sure I read that the same way.
We can sit down and go through it. I was surprised at how uninstructive it was. It was sort of like, here's the reality, right? To your point, Tom, it doesn't say like, here's the border of the city and this is what it's going to be, right? It's like,
border of the city is well, I mean, there's land uses in the ETJ plan that look a lot like they should be city land uses.
yeah, that's true too.
And then there's city, and the city is the city, and there's sort of two steps to annexation. One is kind of consolidating areas that are kind of a patchwork, a little bit here and a little bit there. And yeah, that should probably be consolidated within the city, rather than having little patches of county in the middle of the city. But how, like the western entrance is not in the city, should it be?
Yeah, in the
I mean, there's a gap in the city boundaries.
I know a few planning people from Bozeman and city people really well, and their general like what do you regret over the last 20 years was that Bozeman gave up the ETG fight and limited annexation. So what ended up happening was the county ended up setting all the rules for everything that really happened over there. It's not really, the city of Bozeman's actually pretty limited. If you look at it, they're starting to annex more in, but they said that was the biggest mistake they made, was they kind of walked away from
that's
having control over that process.
And I think that's
and they have more of a county than we do. I mean, our county is almost not there. they're sort of punting on everything these days.
Yeah, well, but I would say, Tom, too, I mean, if you really think about it, I mean, I think that makes a lot of sense what you're hearing from them, Wyatt, because at this point, our county has no land use. Like
Well,
control.
Bozeman
right?
doesn't either, by the way.
Yeah,
Bozeman-
so,
Gallatin
yeah.
County doesn't have a land use plan.
So it's like, you know, like there's no zoning in Park County really, except for, you know, citizen initiated. And so,
Same with Gallatin.
yeah, we can wind up with anything at the edge of the city because,
And the city has no control over that. All we have control over is or we have a zone of influence, which is the ETJ.
The dirt.
What's that, James? I missed it.
I was just saying the dirt. The only thing we have control over is the dirt.
Oh, yeah.
So we just got to decide how much dirt do we want to have in our city.
Yeah.
I mean, just to boil it down to the
So
very bottom.
we could make our recommendation to annex the county into the city. And then zone the county. There,
Turn the whole thing into an E ETJ.
Wonder if that's ever been tried. I don't really know what the answer is.
neither.
I think the competing priorities for me are, I would like to see the city of Livingston's boundaries stay as reasonable as small as reasonably possible. However, I think the county is going to continue to have a really poor planning process for a very long period of time.
There's nothing that appears there doesn't seem to be anything that's going to change that.
So I think,
Which,
and I think our general outcome is we want to maintain the uniqueness of this area. You know, that was our vision statement. It seems to me like the city has to, I don't know, be cautiously aggressive. Does that make any sense? I don't know.
well, basically, if the city has a zone of influence, it should exercise its zone of influence, which is the ETJ. I mean, we can't talk about the rest of the valley, but we can talk about what we have some control over or some influence over, and that's in state law, and we should at least use that opportunity, even if the county wants to go crazy and start subdividing Paradise Valley, which doesn't seem like it's gonna, but it could. The trouble is it could. And but we could do something about the ETJ and should. I mean, the growth policy is pretty clear. It wants the ETJ to stay largely undeveloped or very lightly developed. It wants it to stay kind of rural, and at least that puts a donut around us, you know, no matter what the county does, which
Yeah, I read that.
but we have no control over.
I don't read that as conclusionary as you do. I actually didn't think the language was strong enough, Tom. I agree with the outcome you're seeking. I didn't.
Well, if there's a path to that outcome, it does, that land use plan is pretty bloody clear.
Yeah,
You know, and a picture's worth 1,000 words. But
I'd like the city borders to stay as small as humanly possible, but increase the assessed value within the city border as much as possible. That's how we pay for the stuff, is with assessed values.
right. Well,
I think that those
the
are,
property values the way they are, the assessed values are kind of taking care of themselves, sometimes in the wrong direction.
well, but the
We're pretty
taxes-
cheap.
Yeah, the taxes can only go up so much a year. I think that, isn't there there's a cap on that even if the property values rise, if you still own your
Oh,
property,
yeah.
go up a certain
and property values are assessed to the state, not locally.
Oh. But we do have some control over the ETJ, and we should exercise it. And it's a separate process from what the city would do. And it's complicated. I think the statement we have there is pretty right.
I think the only thing that's missing for me is an intentionality around the question that you put out, which was, what does the border look like? Is it what we see largely today? Is it, and then we're really only talking frankly about like the next 10 years. This should all get redone before then anyways.
And a fairly limited area, but a very important limited area. I mean, I mean, a perfect example is that space between, and what's the space between, the city has a commercial zone that's bigger than, twice as big as all the other commercial property in the entire city, out by the Western Freeway entrance. Then there's a gap of county land, and then the city starts up again. Now, is that the way it should be? I don't think so.
Oh, out near the PFL, the 330 exit. Yeah,
I mean, where PFL is in the city.
yeah, it is. We annexed it in when we built it.
And then Voyage, I think, is in the county.
Yeah, and all that space in between is, Voyage is, and the other space out there is in the county. And then
Yeah, I
the
could see that
and
as
then
a
the
natural.
growth policy, which I objected to at the time, zones that as mixed use, which is strip development. Could be.
It could be anything. The mixed use zoning's pretty open-ended.
Pretty open-ended. I'm not sure that's the place for it. I think that's the better place for that is more infill than, building more city. That's just high density city on the edges. That's the same kind of high development donut that most cities object to and we're objecting. It should be contiguous. I think the whole notion of continuing the city grid is important, but yeah, maybe I would agree though that we should make some kind of a statement about the city boundary. Don't you?
I think that's what I'm trying to get to.
I think it is too, and I kind of agree with it.
I'm feeling at odds against it. Because again, on one hand, I want to kind of limit the future expansion but on the other hand, I want to grow control. So
what we'd like is a higher density town surrounded by a lower density surround.
And maybe that's the answer. Maybe the answer is continuing with a special emphasis to continue to focus on high density development. Or high density
within the city.
Within the city, maybe that's.
But to do that, so is there no high density development outside the city?
Well, we can't.
I mean,
the thing that limits
is a really good example.
The thing that limits density outside the city is sewer and water.
Right.
That limits density outside the city boundaries.
Right, but it could also be developed.
I mean, you could in theory put in a private HOA centralized sewage and water treatment plant in.
Well, however you do it extends city utilities.
Yeah,
lots of people have done that. I mean, even that area outside the city and outside the city of Bozeman. Well, most of those subdivisions I think are in the city of Bozeman now.
Bunches of them aren't.
Yeah, there's a bunch of them.
Are they on sewer?
Not on municipal.
Mm-hmm. But they're still too dense to be on septic tanks and wells.
Yeah, I think some of them have their own dedicated systems.
Yeah.
Like I know there's one that's got like a pack and haul plant out near Four Corners. So
yeah, I don't know, but should we be making a statement about that?
I think the goal we're trying to say is that we should be trying to increase density within the city limits is the goal that we keep coming back to.
Is infill over out?
Yeah.
Infill over sprawl.
Yeah.
Sorry.
And Tom, I think that and everyone, I think that's what we heard within the growth policy, right? Was like we kept hearing over and over again, we want infill, we don't want sprawl. we heard that
If-
over and over through that process.
If there
So,
was a message, that was it.
yeah,
Well, let's just say it that way then. Favor infill over, like always,
yeah.
Well,
favor
doesn't it,
infill.
I mean, the growth
Or-
policy kind of does that, and didn't the mission statement address that? Now, it's so long ago, I can't even remember what.
How about prioritize infill over external annexations?
Yeah, the vision statement does not address infill.
Oh, okay, so maybe it should happen here.
I think
Yeah.
it should.
Yeah,
What'd you say, James? Give it to me again.
Prioritize infill over external annexations. Increasing the footprint of the city, but internally, not by expanding the border.
Oh, it doesn't increase. You
It
might,
doesn't increase the footprint, but it increases the density.
density, yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna go a little more like, I don't know, try to make the city as high density as possible. I don't know.
well, Manhattan Island.
Like,
Yeah, we get the projects like Chicago and
Yeah,
with some density that wouldn't.
no,
I mean, I don't know how many people do you want here?
I mean, infill
think about
implies
that.
more stuff. Infill is more stuff within the city.
Yeah.
We're not talking 10-story high rises.
No, we're not.
And those are limited by the zoning code. But, I mean, you can get a lot more density with low rise infill than you have now. I mean, just if everybody built an ADU, there'd be a lot more housing units in town. A lot more. And not just that, but they've also pretty much doubled they've kind of doubled the density by doing that. Almost anywhere in the city. And that's either infill or redevelopment of parcels or stuff, but it's within the city boundaries.
What do we think about where we're at now with this land use? I mean, I think we're close. This is something
Yeah, and maybe we can save it for next week and come back to it. I still feel like we haven't answered the question about the city boundary yet. Like,
Yeah.
Well, it does mention annexation there. It says limited.
Yeah.
But I think you would encourage annexation if you could call it consolidation. I'm just thinking of some of those issues that have just come up before the commission of some of that high density housing behind Albertsons. There's a bunch of high density housing back there. A lot of it's been recently annexed. It's kind of, that to me feels like infill. If you built a subdivision out in the open space north of town, that feels like sprawl.
Yeah.
right, but that's because of the 5 acre tracts history, right? Like the fact that that's already really a neighborhood. It's like,
Well,
but that's,
it's basically continuing the urban pattern and densifying.
right.
I mean, those buildings are all relatively new, and there's a few buildings that are of similar density, but they're kind of spotty. There's few buildings around the downtown that are 3 and 4 story buildings.
I mean, it is a little interesting that the city has so many anomalies to it. Like we have some areas that are kind of like on septic still. We have patchwork annexation. We have patchwork zoning. It's
I'm not sure we have patchwork zoning, but we do have a patchwork city.
well, we know we've got a little bit of it, like your example of like, annexing one piece in, or like, for instance, like we've got a historic preservation zoning that's only applied to one building in the entire town. For instance,
Which one?
The Waterworks building is the only one under the preservation zoning district. It's the only building in the whole city that, and so they created a whole zoning code and applied it to one building.
I didn't know that.
Yeah,
So,
But then they've got a downtown, then they got a downtown historic preservation zone.
well, but that's not a zoning, that's a district, right?
District, right. But
Right, so,
it implies what you can do there in land use.
right.
You
So
you have to jump through it some.
There's a whole quagmire about that pump building as well, and ownership and what they were supposed to do with it within a year or two, I think, after taking ownership of it. There's some interesting stuff with that building.
Well, that pump, I mean, I'm intimately familiar with it. They did what they are obliged to do to it, and they own it. So, and they didn't violate the use of the agreement, and the zoning district requires that they maintain the exterior facade of the building with no addition.
Oh, I thought it was supposed to be changed into something else, but I wasn't involved with the project.
Yeah, I'd be, anyway, that's kind of a sideline. But
Well, no, it's the point I was trying to make was like there's something around. I don't know. I'm a little all over the place, so I apologize, but there's definitely a feeling in my head around like understanding what the city's, I guess, boundary, Tom, to use your word, and its influence area, and then also on top of that, sort of like getting everything on the same page that's within that boundary, which maybe is adjusting the zoning code and subdivision plan.
and I mean, I kind of think that sometimes zoning is the chunks of zoning are in too big, are too big.
Right.
That there ought to be a finer grain in some of it, and that's just traditional. You look at a big piece of property and you don't think of what it's like on a small scale. Like, just the whole discussion around alleys kind of does that. The urban design of something happens at a much smaller scale than zoning does. And, that could be a lecture.
I think I'm okay coming back, Carrie, to answer your question. It still feels like
like we're missing. Yeah.
this competing.
Is there anything else? Okay, well, we have a boundary state. Do we want to sort of leave that and maybe? But I think what those 4 bullets kind of do is start to. I don't think there's anything else we'd want to cover. We might just want to say it differently.
Why don't we somewhere, even if it's like another bullet or in parentheses at the end of infill, like let's just jot something down about the boundary, the city boundary, or so we don't lose it, and then we can come back to it and see if there's something that we want to.
Well, limiting annexation is talking about the city boundary.
Yeah, and this is for me, this is the quandary. How much control do we want versus how much do we want to limit, right?
Frankly, I'd like more control over the ETJ only because the county's providing none. And it's, somebody could go out there and build more subdivisions, and I don't think we'd want to see that. That's kind of against what we were talking about this kind of densification process.
Yeah.
They could go, if it's a 2-mile zone, they can go out in the country, build a subdivision, somehow deal with the sewage or do a lower density, subdivision with wells. And
I think you're gonna end up seeing a lot of like 3 to 5 acre subdivisions in the county.
Yeah. And that's sprawl.
I think you're going to see quite a bit of that.
Yeah. No, and interestingly, it doesn't necessarily make more economic sense. But that's another.
No, it doesn't. When you add in the costs and everything you go through, it doesn't always make
Yeah,
more
I
sense.
mean, you get a marginal increase in land value, but you have to spend a lot of money to get it.
All right, I'm gonna move on because I
I
can't think of it. I
I
can't
think,
think.
I think we've got this thing.
What do we want to? Do we want to go to local services or housing next?
We have 10 minutes.
So,
Housing, I think, is bigger than that.
yeah, both of them are.
Both of them are pretty big, and we can, we're gonna have 2 meetings next week. If we kind of just feel like we're banging our heads against the wall at the moment, we kind of.
I think this little statement, and then the statement in infrastructure is where we'd like to get on all 4 subjects. And what if we made this a goal? If at the end of next Wednesday, try to get housing and services up to this level. So when we go to our 3-hour meeting, we can really get into the weeds on it.
Yeah,
I also don't want to get too fixated until Melissa gets a chance to.
yeah, and that's the other thing too, is I think I really, Melissa was part of the planning board for a long time, worked with this growth policy. I think she's got some really good insights that maybe the rest of us don't have, and I don't want to lose that knowledge and help as well. But I think if we can break some of this out so that maybe when we get to that continue to break some of it out so that when we get to that 3-hour meeting, we're kind of there, and then we can see where she's at too.
When's she coming back?
She'll be back the end of this week, so she should be with us, I think, on Wednesday.
Okay.
And then I know she has it on her schedule for the Friday. So.
Okay. Well, we have that Friday meeting. I think we're going to get a lot done. I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah.
I am too, and maybe we'll bring snacks and beverages so we're like fueled.
I think we should do comments and then just move to adjourn, Carrie.
I think so too. Okay, let's do that. So let's open it up first to any. I just have to do this public comments. I'm gonna stop. Hey, wife, can you stop your share?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Perfect. Okay. I don't see any public, so no public comment this afternoon. So we'll go to member comments. Wyatt, any comments?
No.
Mr. Blue Rock, any comments?
Haven't we had enough?
Of you? Yes.
James, any comments?
No, I'll wait for next week.
Okay. I feel like he's okay. And then my comment is I feel like James is coming with comments next week, so be prepared. And thank you all for a good meeting. I will make sure that we get everything posted for the 2 meetings next week. So we will plan to meet on Zoom Wednesday next week like usual, and then the new city building on the Friday. And do I have a motion to adjourn?
You do.
All right, all in favor? Aye. All right, and you good, Wyatt?
I'm good.
See you later.
See you
All right,
guys.
we'll see you later.
Hasta
Take care.
luego.
Bye.